Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Observable Flutter. My name is Craig Labenz, and I'm your host. And today, I both owe you all a thank you for allowing me to take a little time away, recharge my batteries. I'm feeling really good. I'm excited to be back. I'm also going to need to mute this video that's playing in another window. I'm hearing myself talk. I'm telling you, I'm rusty. Where is this? Oh, here we go. Okay, muted. I'm sorry. Now I'm ready to actually proceed. So, as you may recall, this is the Flutter community. We really want to treat each other as kindly and warmly as we can. So, we're here all to learn together, and let's just try to keep up that wonderful spirit. Today's guest is none other than Andrew Brogdon, one of the originalist OSGs from Flutter Developer Relations, and once a person in my role, now my boss, and he's here to help me today talk about building agentic apps in Flutter. So, Andrew, welcome to Observable Flutter. Would you like to say anything else to introduce yourself?
Yeah, welcome to my storage room / workshop. Yeah, I'm Andrew. I've been on the Flutter team since, let's see, I snuck my way on at the beginning of 2018. And as Craig said, I lead the developer relations team. So I got a bunch of engineers and writers and program managers and stuff like that. And we all work together to make things like this. It's also been a while for me to appear on a stream. We used to do the Boring Show way back in the day. But I haven't been on a live stream in a bit. So this is interesting for me. If you want to, let's see how this goes. But I'm excited. I'm excited to have an excuse to sit down and code with some of these tools that we're going to be trying today, and take a look at a codelab that was recently published by somebody on the team, Brett Morgan. So I'm excited about that. It should be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So today, as you mentioned, we're going to go through a codelab that Brett has written, and then we're going to, and that codelab is about building agentic apps. Would you mind giving folks a primer on what this term is? Because I expect for a lot of people, it's pretty new.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the reason I wanted to be here today. And it's also part of the reason that we're going to be doing a sort of learning campaign over the next few weeks. It's about building agentic apps with both Flutter, and we're partnering with the Angular and Firebase teams. So obviously this is a Flutter stream. We'll be talking about Flutter, but Firebase will be used for the back end. And if you have friends who are Angular developers, or maybe you also use Angular, that's an option too. We'll have some new resources. We'll have some live streams like this one from various teams, and we'll be online answering questions and things like that. So I'm super excited about that. But let's talk about, like, terminology is so, even internally, I've seen the terms evolve at Google, and getting a handle on them has been tricky. So let me give you a couple ones that I've seen stick. So the term for agent, it's changed, but I think they've sort of landed on something now. An agent is the combination of a reasoning capability, like a large language model, with a goal, and then tools that allow it to interact with the outside world and accomplish the goal. And so in this case, a tool could be the ability to ask the user for information. We recently had a demo at Google Cloud Next that did that. It could prompt the user for UI by working with the app to get more information to come to a conclusion. It could be accessing device APIs, or making a network call or something like that, getting information that it needs. If you had an agent that was placing calendar events for you, the ability to call into a calendar API and actually make an event, that would be a tool that you could give the agent, things like that. So it's really just an LLM with some code around it that gives it a purpose and a way of achieving the purpose. And there's a number of ways to do that. We'll be talking about one today. And an agentic app, since I also threw that term at people a minute ago, an agentic app is just an app that uses an agent to do a thing that you couldn't have done before because it was like too hard or too expensive. And so there are things that you can do with an agent guiding the experience that you might not have been able to do before. You can, there's been AI forever, but this new breed of agents can do things like guide a workflow with a user that changes every time based on what's going on, for example. They can combine data from multiple sources the way that we used to do with, like, a mashup. I'm dating myself there by if anybody remembers the 2005, 2006 mashup scene where people would be like, I want a map with all the sheep in Scotland. And like you could do that by combining Google Maps with like the sheep data feed that the Scottish government had. You can use LLMs to do things like that. And so yeah, that is my 60-second spiel on agents and agentic things. And we're going to look at one today.
Nice. Yeah. Who amongst us has not at one point or another wanted a map of all the sheep in Scotland? I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
I'm sure it was a hit on Dig way back in the day.
Yeah, probably. All right. So I am going to share my screen so we can get started here. So as teased previously, we're going to begin this by looking at a code lab that was written by a teammate of both Andrew's and mine, Brett Morgan. He's on Flutter Developer Relations. If you've not heard of him and you're like, who's Brett Morgan? A little more back of house, go to events and you'll meet him there. And the code lab itself is called Build a Gemini Powered Flutter App. And it is pretty awesome, I got to say. Now, I'm not sure whether or not we think it makes sense to like read the whole thing step by step, do every single step. We absolutely can, Andrew. I've set the whole thing up all the way to the end. So I know all the Google APIs for me are turned on and Firebase is ready to go and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, folks at home should do this code lab. The hardest part is configuring your project in Firebase and the Google Cloud Console, which isn't terribly hard either, especially with Flutterfire Configure. So the whole code lab is very approachable and really shows some very cool behavior that is obviously just a starting point. You know, picking a color doesn't necessarily warrant a whole app, but as Andrew is kind of teasing earlier, you know, there's a lot richer stuff that you can do with this kind of functionality. So Andrew, do you think we should go through the whole thing, or should we just kind of like read it and talk about the code? Because those things might actually be functionally the same.
It depends on what you how you would normally want to code this up. So I think reading and going through the code lab, like we have other videos where people are like, let me walk you through a code lab, you know, and we'll probably have one for this one too. I think looking at the pieces of this app that Brett guides readers through creating is the most important thing. Right. Because it's designed as part of the campaign, the Building Agentic Apps campaign. What we're going to do is offer 4 different sort of starter kits that people can clone and then modify and play with, and just sort of put their ingenuity to work. You know, we talked about how, yeah, excellent. Thank you. That's the campaign. You can go register for it right now. The only thing you're committing to by registering is getting more emails from us. You'll get 4 or 5 emails during the course of the campaign. That's all you're signing up for. So don't hesitate. But the starter kits are designed to give people the structure of an application that's agentic, and then you know, take a piece of code out, put a piece of code in. So now the agent does something else, you know. And so this is the one that Brett's made for the campaign. And so the pieces of this, I think, are very good to talk about. Like, how do you define one of these functions, one of these tools that you give the agent? Where is the prompt that tells the agent what it's supposed to do?
Right.
These are some interesting things. You know, I don't think we need to sort of go exactly through the whole thing line by line. There's a reason the code lab's published, is so people can do that. So,
all right, we're vibing then. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I will step through each thing. We're not going to actually make all the edits like Andrew was just saying, but at each step, I'm going to kind of scroll down the page and highlight what is worth having context on there. Again, this says 60 minutes, probably 20 of it is fiddling in the Google Cloud Console, and then the rest is just copying, pasting code and like thinking about it and realizing like, oh, that's neat. And so it's super, super approachable, as all of the code labs are, in my opinion. So this, if you've done one of the Flutter code labs before, you know the first couple steps here are actually just like, hey, this is what you're doing. So we can also skip this. I think for our purposes, this is just kind of laying some plumbing, some foundational stuff around the Flutter architecture. You actually do learn quite a bit also about just generic Flutter development and some really good best practices for how to separate your concerns and whatnot. And step 2 is laying a clean foundation for all of that isn't actually important for this stream's purposes of learning about the different AI tools. So I'm going to skip this one as well.
Real quick, I want to talk about Vertex AI and Firebase and what it is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I would invite you to summarize for folks.
Cool. Yeah. So there's there's a number of products that Google offers right now for developers to build agents. One of the easiest for Flutter developers to get started with is Vertex AI and Firebase. And that's the one that's going to be shown in this codelab. Vertex AI and Firebase allows you to access Gemini securely through Firebase, so you don't have to like bake an API key for the apps, the AI Studio into your app or anything like that. You get all the stuff that normally comes with Firebase, and you can build your agent, and it executes in the app using Dart code. So you don't have to worry about learning a different language or anything like that. You can use the Dart code you already know and enjoy to build the code around the LLM that sort of turns it into an agent. And for that reason, I find it a very easy first step into this world, and why I think it's a great choice for this codelab.
All right.
Thank you, Craig. That was my spiel about Vertex AI and Firebase.
You nicely ended that right as I was taking a sip, which left us with an awkward gap there. Okay, so this part is more about setting up Firebase, again, configuring. I've already done these steps. They do take a little bit of time. Entitlements, all this kind of stuff, blah, 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 blah. This is probably where things start to get interesting. So I'm going to stop and focus on the create the Gemini model providers step. So this codelab uses Riverpod, which I know a lot of folks in the chat are ardent Riverpod fans. Brett is one of you. And the foundations that Brett has you lay out here start in this file, libproviders gemini.dart. And some of this is going to be pretty familiar, especially if you've done Firebase stuff before. Like if you ran Flutter Fire configure and got all of your different platform configurations, then you know that you can just kind of use this current platform cheat code to immediately initialize your app, and all of the API keys and everything are sitting in that file over there. And then there is a Gemini model class, and we can see here that function, and we can see that this is a Riverpod thing because it takes the ref and it's going to pull it out of the Riverpod infrastructure, and ultimately is so what it pulls out of the infrastructure is just that Firebase is initialized, and this is the code that actually starts to get you doing Firebase Vertex AI things. And we'll see at the top here, of course, that library is imported, and you pass in the model as a string name, and all of these names are available in the documentation for the Firebase Vertex AI library. And they're also just the string names that you would see in Google AI Studio when you choose a library. When you choose a model here, you can just select this bottom string here, pass that into your code. And as long as that is one that is available with Firebase Vertex AI, like maybe they aren't all, then it will work. And all of the ones that are available are listed in the documentation. And then we see here some chat session stuff that goes back to a previous step where Brett was laying out that nice infrastructure to have a clean implementation in this Flutter app. So, and then there's implement the chat service. I don't think I'm going to spend much time worrying about this. This is good to think about. Again, especially if you're newer with Flutter, this is some really nice Riverpod tutorial and just Flutter architecture tutorial stuff here, but I'm going to skip over it for now. And again, more Riverpod usage because Riverpod has a lot of magic code generation, so you can get that out of the way. Then in the main.dart file, this mostly, I believe, connects it connects both the UI, because in this code lab, Brett has gone through all the trouble of not making us think about the UI at all. He's literally published to pub.dev, a package for the UI for this code lab, unlikely to be a dependency in many published Flutter apps, but it's a very cool use of, pub.dev to simplify this code lab, I think. And then we're ultimately setting up here some, turning on that UI with this main screen widget, and then also connecting some of this infrastructure to talk to Firebase AI with Riverpod and whatnot, setting that up with some of these callbacks and whatnot. So, Andrew, any commentary so far before we move on to the next screen?
No, I think, one of the things you can get out of this sort of section of the code lab is just how to talk to a model and what the sort of, how to deal with that sort of back and forth that you have of managing the state of a conversation with the model, which in this case, Brett is building into the UI that you can see it. You don't necessarily have to do that. But in some cases where you're working with a model to get to a particular result, seeing sort of what it's coming up with as you're progressing through a workflow can be very handy. So, no, I think the interesting thing here is sort of the state management of it, and also where he sets up the model in the first place.
Yeah, I was just reading some chat here. I have some good questions coming in. Wouldn't an enum be better than a string name for Gemini models? Yeah, ish. Except that because this is a published package, if it took an enum, the minute Google releases a new package, the library wouldn't be able to talk to it without updating. So if you're doing something like this in one of your apps and you control everything, then yes, I would say use an enum. But because this package wants to allow developer freedom as Google iterates on model revs, I think a string, unfortunately, almost makes sense. Any thoughts you have there, Andrew?
Only that they're unlikely to deprecate any of the strings. So once you have it right, I think at a certain point a model might fall off the list or something like that. But you'll get plenty of warning there, and so I think defining your own enum if you want to use one is a good idea.
Yeah, true. If you're that's a good point. When you're writing your own app, even if I was thinking about a different scenario where you're controlling everything, but yeah, in your own app, you could have an enum and not pass in the string. That would be totally valid. Okay. So now there's some other, by the way, I've starred some good questions we're going to get back to later. So if you think, hey, I asked a good question, you probably did. And I might just have it starred. Okay. Moving on to step 4 of the code lab. So this is, I think, a pretty interesting step in terms of within a Flutter app, how would you architect some clean, how would you cleanly design and where would you put the stuff for a good prompt? And then also just what goes into a good prompt? Because when I read this code lab, I was really surprised at how long the system prompt is. Because remember, the functionality of this app is just you describe a color, Gemini comes up with a color, and then the app shows the color. That's it. And the system prompt for this ends up being quite long, which I found interesting myself. So we see it here in this system prompt. It's just in a markdown file that later some Dart code will actually load in and supply this string from. But it is, I think, interesting just taking a second, because whenever I try to do something with an LLM, I never write a prompt this long. So that may be behind why I don't get perfect outcomes all the time. So you see here, it's telling the LLM, right, what you are. You're good at this. I think a lot of us have heard that, giving the LLM a pep talk almost makes it do better, which is funny. But, telling it that it's a color expert and telling it what its job is, and telling it how the response should come out. That's all in the first sentence. And then there's going to be so much more extrapolation into all of those concepts. So your capabilities, you are knowledgeable about color theories, how to translate natural language description into specific RGB values. I would just say to someone, I would say to the LM, make me a color for such and such, and hope it figures out that it should know how to do all these things, but this actually helps it perform better by kind of pulling it in the direction of these concepts. When users describe a color. So here, Brett is really being prescriptive on exactly how the LLM should behave and how it should respond. Actually, no, that's what comes next, how to respond to users. So this is actually just the thinking that it should do. So analyze what they're talking about, determine, and then also we talk about the different color values here between 0 and 1, so not 0 to 255, which would have been a reasonable assumption for the LLM to make, but that's not the one we're going with. Blah, 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 all the way on down. And I used this, I encountered this one. It says somewhere, down here. If descriptions are unclear, if a color description is ambiguous or unclear, please ask the user clarifying questions one at a time. So I was just being dumb earlier, actually it was this morning. And I said something like, a color blue like the belly of a blue dragon and red like the sun setting over a small town, which makes no sense. And it came back because Brett asked it to, presumably is why. And it was like, hey, between the blue and the red, which one should be more important? And I was like, I don't know, I guess the red. And then it actually gave me a color that I found really, really beautiful. And I was like, I do see some blue under that red. Like, wow, incredible.
That's Brett's magic phrase, by the way. Ask clarifying questions one at a time.
Oh, really?
He's been working with this stuff for months and months now, and that when he stumbled onto that recommendation from somebody, he's like, this made it was like a light switch going on for him. He's putting it in everything now, because it's like, if the model determines that it's not able to give a high quality response, it gives it a sort of an out to be like, I don't have enough information to do the thing that you asked me to do. So I can, instead of giving you garbage or some kind of hallucination, I also have the option to seek more information. And that is a thing that you can do when you're designing one of these agents, is be like, if you can't give me a high quality output, you can do these things. And here he's just saying, ask clarifying questions, but you can also give it tools and recommend their use in those moments.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's a super interesting anecdote, and that makes sense. I imagine this really reduces the hit rate of just wanton hallucinations.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, then there's some more stuff, blah, blah, blah. But this is a pretty long prompt, and I think worth kind of reading and understanding for whenever you write your own prompt for either the competition or some app in the future or whatever you're doing. Yeah. Certainly, I don't type all of this into the Gemini console every time I ask it a quick question, but maybe I should.
It's a good structure, though. That's the thing that I take away from it. Like those, it's handy that he's got the markdown headers in there. You can take that structure, sort of empty out what he's got in there, and put in the sort of description, the persona that you want to give the agent, and the goal, and how to respond in certain situations. You can take that structure, just start substituting in your own stuff to make an agent of your own.
All right, then we scroll down and we see the Dart code that loads this stuff up. And this is also marked with Riverpod. So this is going to be a thing that you could do. You could use the magic ref object to get after you run code generation. At least I think that's what that means. And let's see what's down in here now. Literally what we were just talking about, grabbing the system prompt, using ref, and then the system prompt, so this is an interesting line, goes into the system instruction parameter when you instantiate the generative model, and that will that's the SDK here, the library, handling the task of shuttling that along with each each message, each iteration of the chat that you have with Gemini. Okay. So then you run the app and you see the state of it at that point, but we're not going to worry about doing that right now. The next two steps are, I think, like the really, really cool stuff where you get into tool definition and usage. So you mentioned tools earlier, Andrew, and how they are there a way the LLM can augment its functionality? Someone in the chat was just talking about RAG, retrieval augmented generation. And I don't think those are necessarily considered tools. Not that, well, as you were saying, they were. But for a while, LLMs have had the ability to look stuff up and whatnot. And you could think of that as a tool, but I don't think it's how it's been defined in this context. But a tool is also an ability for the LLM to take like a not necessarily idempotent action. It could send an email, and you obviously wouldn't want it to like send the email repeatedly. So do things that actually affect the world, which is pretty cool. And what's neat about the tool, and we see the definition here. What's neat about tools with these LLMs is like maybe there are some models or some like setups where they actually call the function, but what happens in this situation is you just declare to the model what easy buttons it could press, but it doesn't actually, this is dark code where everything is compiled at runtime. Or compiled ahead of time. There's no runtime introspection. It wouldn't really be that easy to like pass in this function with arbitrary parameters and have the LLM figure out how to call it, like this is Python or something where the introspection just kind of, it's introspection all the way down. So you actually just tell Gemini what functions you are willing to call. If it says, yes, I have decided that function you made available to me is appropriate for this situation, it'll be like, please call it. And then you do in fact call it for it. And that closes the loop. Yeah. So
can I jump in here for a second?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So we scrolled past a little bit. If you scroll up, there's two terms that mean basically the same thing that you're gonna see as you're reading about these things and then reading this code lab. They'll refer to it either as tool calling or function calling, and those terms we use them mostly interchangeably. So it's function calling in here. It's function calling in some of the docs. Elsewhere, you might hear it as tool calling because that's the function that you're giving the LLM is a tool for it to use. And the idea here is, I remember Ian Hickson used to say that without side effects in functions, just generally in software engineering, without side effects, computers wouldn't be able to do anything useful. Because like painting a pixel on the screen is technically a side effect. A pure function couldn't do that. And this is kind of the same thing. This is what takes an LLM from a cute thing that will complete a sentence for you, into the realm of something with agency and that can actually do a thing that's useful in the real world. And so these tools, just like the system prompt defines, what the agent is meant to accomplish and how it's kind of meant to go about it, the tools are sort of how it can reach out and affect the outside world or learn from the outside world. And so in this case, Brett's codelab it's saying, hey, you can give me a color value if you want to set a piece on the display to show that color. It's a very simple function that it's offering, but it's how this agent can affect the state of the app, so to speak. And so whatever, when you go to write your own agent, this library of functions that you give it that's you building the code around an LLM to say, within my app, this is the agency that you, the LLM, have. These are the things that you can do, the things that you can ask for, and my app will make it happen in the dark code that I write that works, that makes that LLM into an agent, so to speak. Hopefully that all made sense. I sort of combined like 5 different topics into that one spiel, but hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, and I think about just the amount of flexibility for, like, let's say you wanted to use an LLM as a web scraper, which I think a lot of people are doing. The way you web scrope before was painfully writing HTML parsers in, I've actually only done it in Python, so it would be, I guess, like beautiful soup. Or if you're using JavaScript, you could use jQuery syntax to drill into where in the DOM you expect the information that you care about to be, pull it out, and then, save it to the database or whatnot. But if the user changes the website owner redesigns everything, like your scraper is completely useless. Obviously, an LLM can just, by apparent magic, scrape arbitrary HTML and pull out what you care about. And they're honestly just mind-blowingly good at it. But then you need to kind of close that loop again of like saving the record somewhere of this page that was scraped. And maybe it's a one-to-many relationship that was scraped or something. And the LLM can basically even, you could declare to it as tools the save an item function, save a related item function, follow this link function. And just by the magic of the fact that they seem somewhat able to think, it can, do the whole task essentially. And so that if you didn't have tool functioning, you'd basically just get this really big thing back from the LLM, and then you'd have to interpret it yourself and like call those functions yourself. So it's just like a little bit nicer to have it decide even when the function should be called. All right. So now we are going to declare just such a function. And there's an interesting aspect here because, again, I mentioned earlier, this is Dart code, so it's compiled ahead of time. There's no introspection. You're not actually beholden to give the LLM like the exact name of the function. That might be easier and to keep your code cleaner. But in this whole code lab, there is no Dart function called set_color. This isn't even a Dart capitalization scheme. This would be a more Python style capitalization scheme. But we're telling Gemini, you can do this thing called set color. Here's a little more information about what it is, and then highly structured representation of the parameters that you're going to need to give to us when it comes time to call this set color function. And so I think that's just kind of worth pointing out here, that this doesn't have to map one-to-one to your own code. And then you actually just list the things in the function declarations part of this tools thing here. And we're in the Gemini tools class for what it's worth, which will be available via Riverpod. So as we continue on down and we get back into where we generated the instance of the model itself, we can now pass the tools class that we just defined to the tools object or the tools parameter in this generative model constructor. And it was, of course, pulled out of the swamp via Riverpod. Any thoughts, any color, Andrew?
No, I think you can, hopefully folks, as you're going through this, you're sort of seeing us do the things that define what the agent is. It's like, here is your persona and what you can, a general description of what you need to do. Here are the tools to do it, and we're about to do implementing tool handling, and then there's the UI. And then I think at that point, you've got the building blocks in place.
Yep. All right. So this, I believe, pretty much wraps up. Obviously, a lot of this text is good to read, but this largely wraps up step 5. And then in step 6, we're actually going to call that set color function when Gemini indicates it as such. So we'd already declared the function down below, but no such function existed. There was nothing like that. So now there is a new handle function call method that this is what gets the structured data back from Gemini. And you can just see a little switch statement here on the function name that is passed in as this parameter. And if it's set color, we see here that the handle set color method is what is actually getting called in Dart. And the arguments are structured in the way that we saw in this definition. And then handle set color takes its arguments and it pulls out values and turns them into doubles and blah, 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 and uses more Riverpod magic to use a state notifier and actually update a color within the app, which we are very close to being ready to watch operate.
Reminds me a little bit of wiring up method channels.
Yeah, that's true. You have a necessary async hop and you get some JSON data back, and then you have to hydrate it back into your full Dart objects. Yeah, absolutely. All right. then in the chat message, I don't think I'm going to worry. I think I'm basically all set, unless you feel otherwise, Andrew.
Well, let's real quick talk about that where it says add from here to here. That first line there. So this is where the app is getting a piece of streaming data from the model, right, from the service that is Vertex AI and Firebase, and saying, okay, what is the model now telling me? Either is it text? The model is giving me a piece of text to display to the user, or is the response, hey, I'd like to call a function. And you can see that if response.function calls is not empty, that is where this, Brett has it in here where he's like, okay, did the model ask to invoke a function? If so, invoke the correct function on the Dart in my app, and then respond back to the model to say, hey, okay, I did the function, I'm done, let's go, what's the next step?
Yeah, great point. Would have been remiss to skip. And we see here we're looping over. There could be arbitrary amounts of function calls, and here's that handle function call method that we were looking at a second ago, or passing in the name of the args.
Yeah, so this is just a big if then that's like, hey, are you trying to do one of the things I told you could do? If so, I'll run off and do it for you and let you know how it goes.
Yeah. And you can imagine the difficulty in just deducing in like a set color scenario. Maybe it wouldn't be that hard. You just pull the hex value out of the response. But in something really complicated where there's like 20 different things it could do, and it's going to do a different amount of them based on results every time, figuring out for yourself which actions the LLM's response indicate should be taken would be really, really hard. So this is a lot easier than that. Okay. Let me make sure I'm not skipping anything else here. Understanding the flow of communication. Yeah. So this is, again, being more explicit about the stuff we were just talking about.
This is where he says exactly the thing that I just...
Yep. The codelab doesn't miss. Okay, I think we are ready. The 7th step is a nice UX improvement to the final app, and is definitely worth going through. The running version of the app that I have is on step 7. So I think now we're probably ready to make a color, and then we'll get into whatever mad science attempt we want to make today to do something different. So let's see if I can get it to be confused again like it did earlier today when I said blue like the color of a blue dragon's belly, and red like the setting sun over a small town, which of course makes no sense. Oh, this time it actually just gave me a color. This is what I thought it would do before. I thought I would get a kind of purple. So this time it decided, again, these are not deterministic systems. This wasn't as confusing as the exact same text was last time. Wow, quite a vivid image. Let's break that down. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we can see that it just, it gave us a magenta color. What color do you think we should generate, Andrew?
What would happen if you asked it to generate a color and then gave it like an object, and then the name of the object is something that doesn't exist?
Oh,
like, show me the color of a gentle snarkle.
I see.
I wonder if we could get it to ask one of those clarifying questions.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good. What is a snarkle? That's an interesting one. Since snarkle isn't a typical color descriptor, I'll interpret it as something playful, soft, a bit mischievous. But now it looks like we're getting a clarifying question here. Would you imagine that snarkle would be more of a warm color or a cool color or something more neutral?
There you go. What do you think?
I think.
Any shout outs from the comment stream about what a snarkle might look like?
Yeah. What is a snarkle to you all? Oh, the new mic. Yeah, it's I'm revealing the magic trick right now by clipping my arm behind it. I should have pointed this way. I got rid of the mic arm there. Neutral color for sure from Alec. All right. I'm going to type in exactly what you said. You even capitalized the N. Neutral color for sure. All right. There it is. A gentle snarkle suggests a subdued, calming color. I'm thinking something along the lines of soft beige or light gray with a hint of warmth.
Looks like a great sedan. Good color for a sedan.
I don't know if anyone is we got any Rick and Morty fans here, but the Interstellar TV episodes where they're just like, and then the snorkel goes into the Bloobenblorp and is, spun around in the centrifuge with Gerbity blops. That's what I'm getting right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And it's cool. I really like the way Brett's designed this, where you have both the left and the right. You have, you could imagine if you were shipping this in an app, that interaction log, you wouldn't actually have that in the app. This is a great thing for sort of learning this as an exercise and seeing what's going back and forth. So you can kind of imagine it's like having the Chrome console open while you're working with your web app. You can see what the actual communication is with the model, even though the user facing experience that you might ship is there on the left.
Yeah, this is it's a neat debugging panel and quite neat. All right, apparently this is what a plumbus is, after I refused to give it any helpful information. Although I did use the word green. Color. Yeah. All right. So, Andrew, would you like to share with the audience what we are going to attempt to build in remaining time? And this attempt will extend into next week if we don't finish today. Would you like to share what we're going to work on?
Okay. And so this is the wallpaper idea that we were talking about before.
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. So yeah, I've wanted for a while a way to have wallpaper based on what's going on. Oh, hey, Kevin. Live long and prosper. Wallpaper. I wondered if you could have an app that generated wallpaper based on what's going on in the world in a way that made me feel happy and safe. It's very important to point out. And thinking about what the models are good at. They're good at manipulating text and understanding text. They're good at generating images now. Vertex AI and Firebase has access to the ImageN model. And so we were kicking around the idea of, could we give a model some news headlines and have it pick out the most encouraging one and then generate an image that could be used as like a mobile phone wallpaper from that. And you can imagine an agent in this case, it would be in charge of, looking through headlines and deciding which one is the most positive and encouraging. It would be then translating that from text into an image. And so these are the sort of, and then it would display that to the user. So you can imagine like the persona in that system prompt that we showed in the CodeLab. It's like, hey, you're an expert in making images based on what's going on in the world. You have the ability you're going to get some news from us. You have the ability to determine whether or not there is a good headline in there, and maybe the app could go fetch more just in case. Maybe it's a really bad day.
Yeah, test imagination skills.
So you could potentially have a tool that it could call for that. It could have a tool to, much like the app you just saw was setting a color in the UI. It had a tool that it could do. There could be a tool for displaying the wallpaper in the UI. And if we have time, there's an API for, at least on Android. I don't think you could do this on iOS, but at least on Android, you can set programmatically the wallpaper for the device with the right permissions. And I know there are some Flutter plugins that can do that. If we got that far, we could give it that tool as well to say, you can set the wallpaper for the device. And so I believe we're in AI Studio now.
We are.
So we take a look at this.
Ready to sandbox. Yeah. So our plan is to explore what we would even daisy chain together directly in AI Studio. And then if we get a pipeline that we think makes sense, try to stitch it together in the actual Dart code and see it all happen.
Exactly.
We are extraordinarily unlikely to have a new background on an emulator at the end of this stream, but maybe at the end of next stream in a week.
Yeah, close.
So
yeah, the idea, again, the Building Agentic Apps campaign, the idea is to take one of these starter kits and in a weekend or two, just kind of hack on it to do something that looks interesting and fun to you and to enjoy that experience and to just get a basic handle on, we hear from 1,000 places right now, we're hearing the same message, which is that AI is magical, right? And it does all these magic things, and it's magic and it's amazing. And one of the responses that I have to that is, this magic is great, but I'm actually not a magician. I'm a software engineer. And so how do I take this magic and make it useful, right? Have it actually do a thing that's interesting and useful to me. That's kind of what this is about. And so having that, if I had that app on my phone right now, I would use it every day to do this. And so how do we take these things that can do amazing stuff and actually build a useful thing out of them, get them wired up, and do something that I really want to have on my device every day. So, yeah.
Andrew,
all right, let me just inject a little mini rant into your
you're
Craig. Apparently what I came here today to do.
This is not much more than a series of mini rants. I in the past have shamelessly hijacked my own stream to work on pet grievances or whatnot. Once I debugged the demo for a talk that I was going to give or had already given. I don't remember the timeline. So I nicely done on, we're gonna build this little pet project that Andrew wants. That's good. Okay. The first things,
yeah.
You had an RSS feed for the news.
I did. There's a number of RSS feeds that are out there, and I know.
Chat to me the one you had.
Let me ping you. There is one. If you do a little Google searching, you can find lists of APIs that people have created that are open, either authenticated or not. There are also RSS feeds that are intentionally open and things like that. And in this case, we're going to be looking at these titles of headlines from news articles and transforming them into something else. And so that's the idea here.
All right. I'm not going to write a full-length prompt like we were just talking about the glories of now, but at some point that may end up being more important. So, we're going to start with a shorter one. Do I even want to be like, you are an expert at fetching news from an RSS feed? I think I'm going to start as dumb as possible, and we'll see how much we need to add. Please use this RSS feed, and then I'm going to try to get unnecessarily cute by putting it at the bottom. Let's see if this works. It appears to understand Markdown, so it might. Please use this RSS feed to load recent news headlines and extract the most uplifting and cheerful one. I'm just going to start with that. Unless you have any thoughts, any immediate edits that you would propose. I'm hitting enter. Run. Oh, it's giving us a
Python example.
So this sounds like it's already a tool that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that means that what I'm going to do instead is pretend I've wired up the tool, because we're working on the daisy chain here only. And I'm going to pass in the response to it's probably fine. I'm just going to grab everything. All right. We've got this response, and I'm going to open up a new window, actually. AI Studio. Please give me a new window. And I'm going to put in all of this text.
Tell you what, actually, I just had an idea. One of the things Gemini is really good at is generating fake test data. What if we asked it to generate, we could use this during our testing. We could just ask it, generate a fake RSS feed for news articles on the web. I just tried this in a window.
Okay.
For news articles on the web, should be in XML format and contain 20 article records. Let me see what it gives me. I'm sorry if my typing is very loud, by the way.
Your typing is quite loud.
I bring the thunder to the live stream.
That's right. Generate a fake RSS feed for containing. Do we want to even direct this to have it be positive news articles? Positive news articles.
Yeah, here. Let me just ping you. This is a prompt I just gave it.
Oh, wonderful.
And this will, using synthetic data, you know, since we're just trying this out, this will get us to where we need to be. And there we go. And now I bet you we can ask it. So you could copy that and go stick it in a file somewhere, just so you have it, right? Mm-hmm. But you could probably ask it in this chat, extract the headlines from each one.
Okay.
Extract the please extract the headlines from each one. Headlines can be found between inside a title tag, and I bet you it gives you those 20.
I bet we don't even have to give it that instruction.
You want
Though if it fails,
right,
I'm certainly willing to.
Yeah.
Please extract the headlines from each element in that RSS feed and return them in a
list.
Yeah, I was wondering if I should say like structured list or something.
I'll give you JSON by default. Are those the right one?
Incredible. So experts warn of impending emoji shortage. Love that. And that is the last one. So
boom. Giant rubber duck spotted drifting toward New York City. God, I want to see that as a wallpaper.
Yeah.
Local man successfully trains pigeons. This is adorable. It's interesting the different personalities the models have by default. Yeah. I feel like Google's is a little whimsical. Just, you know, if you don't give it anything else to go on, it's just like, yeah, a little whimsy in your day. Local squirrel elected mayor.
Government announces plans to replace currency with memes. That one unintentionally, cool. Kind of actually a real headline.
Yeah.
All right. So now, do we want to ask it for the happiest or maybe even the funniest? Given that none of these are
that's a good
dark
point. Yeah. So this is stuff that would, you know, could go in the system prompt eventually. You could ask it, hey, based on pick which of those, you know, out of those headlines, is there one that is positive, is a feel-good story and humorous? You know, you could ask it that and let the model make a decision about whether there's one in there, right? And then in our app, you know, we could give it the ability to go get more. And again, we're mocking this out with synthetic data, but in the real world, we could give it the option to keep looking for headlines until it finds something that meets the criteria, and it could decide when the criteria is met. So you could say, please, if there is a headline in that list that is positive, upbeat and funny, you know, pick it out. Otherwise, ask for more headlines. You know, just like Brett had that, you know, please ask clarifying questions one at a time.
Right.
You could say, if there's at least one headline in there that's positive and humorous, select the most positive and humorous. If there aren't any, ask for more news.
So here, English is just annoying me. The actual way to complete the sentence, please select the top headline from that list, which has the following attributes: positivity, and then it'd be like funniness,
humor.
That's better.
There you go.
Randall proposed most unusual. I do like that. And
unusual, yeah.
Most unusuality. Why is English the worst?
Unusual is an attribute. You can use that.
And most unusual. Okay. Unusualification. The sun officially declares itself a cat person. All right.
Was that in the list? Let's go back and check. There it is. Yeah. Fourth from the bottom.
The sun officially declares itself a cat person.
All right.
Okay. That seems pretty good.
Okay.
So now in the daisy chain, we need to say, first of all, image generation doesn't work in 2.0 Flash, right?
I think we discovered that shortly before the stream began. Yeah. Forgive us. This stuff is changing pretty quickly.
So try this one. And now I think we just say, oh, there was a step you had of asking it to even write a good prompt. So,
oh yeah,
write a good image. Write good is too ambiguous. And evocative. I don't know how to spell. Write an evocative image generation prompt for an image generation model, which I'm not using yet. So I'm going to go back to Flash. For an image generation model. Actually, I don't think we really have to say that. Write an evocative image generation prompt for this news headline.
Yeah. And this is something, you know, the folks that work on sophisticated agents and multi-model agents and stuff like that in cloud applications especially, this is something they do, from what I understand, fairly commonly. They will have one agent create the prompt one LLM or agent create the prompt that goes into something else, you know, and formats the data correctly to make a good prompt statement. You want to pull up image effects and just try that?
Oh,
use image effects?
No. Yeah.
Since we're having trouble actually getting it to generate, finding the right way to trigger the image generation.
Well, we're
just doing the prompt now. Sorry,
yes.
I'm still keeping up. I definitely wasn't looking at images of cat-shaped suns over here.
So we've got a handful to pick from, which I think is great. I'm not going to read them all, but maybe we just pick the style that we like. Humorous pop art, conceptual, photorealistic, surreal, abstract. I'm into that one, I think, without having read it yet. Or whimsical, cartoonish. That would be my second choice. Where's your heart at?
First choice?
Surreal, abstract.
Station of the Sun with feline qualities.
Well, I haven't read them, but you are certainly allowed to. I'll read chat.
Yeah. I would avoid the first one just because it's calling out a particular studio for their art style.
Oh, good call. Okay, I see that. Yep.
And what was the fourth one?
The fourth one, humorous pop art, also does mention specific styles.
Specific artists. Let's go with the second one then, which I think is relatively general. Yeah, that was your favorite, right?
It was based on just the concept.
I enjoy surrealist art.
All right. Now we jump over to image generation. This would, in theory, be the final part of the daisy chain. Oh, yeah, I'm going to have to do Command Enter. Unable to generate an image at this time.
Do you need to start a new chat? I don't know.
Yeah, that absolutely could be true. New chat. Still have to do Command Enter.
I know we have the model to do this.
Oh, there's cat paws.
See a paw.
Okay, so now I'm going to read this for the first time. An abstract representation of the sun with feline qualities. Imagine solar flares shaped like cattails, a core that resembles a ball of yarn, and sunspots that look like paw prints. This is to the letter a perfect generation. Mm-hmm. Use warm, fiery colors and a surreal, dreamlike composition. Nailed it.
Yeah. Do you want to see it? What happens if I'm going to mess with your prompt now. What if we changed it out to cartoon style? So not abstract, just a representation of the sun. If you hover over it, you can edit it, I think. I don't know why I'm pointing at my screen as if you're sitting next to me. That's obviously not helping at all. So like instead of an abstract representation, you could say a cartoon representation of the sun.
I see.
And then at the end, I think there's surrealist art. I would just get rid of that whole sentence and see what it comes up with.
Okay. All right.
And then rerun it.
I did love that last image. It was quite far from the sun. No, it's okay.
Whoa.
This one is.
Oh, look, it's better. A bad tattoo. We've created a bad tattoo.
Yeah, you can.
Your thing was better. I'm sorry.
You can get these in Vegas on the cheap. But the other one was pretty far from the sun declaring itself a cat person.
Yeah, how would the sun communicate, though? How would the sun communicate with us? I think a paw solar flare might be the sun reaching out to say, hello, I like cats.
Could be. That's
fine.
true. Could be. All right. Are we ready to start daisy chaining, declaring some tools and prompts for this?
Yeah, like you copied that fake data out, right?
In theory, the chat history is still there somewhere, I hope.
They updated the UI and now our files.
Is it gone?
It can't be gone. It's got to have the history there somewhere. Interesting. So back to chat real quick.
Seems like it's gone.
It's going to be... I saw you cut and paste it, but I think you cut and pasted things after that too. Fortunately, we could just generate more. We're not going to have the awesome sun declares itself a cat person thing.
Yep.
But we could just ask it the same thing and cut and paste it out. And then also, that could go in a mocked file or a mocked class for news providers.
Yeah. And then when you replace the fake headlines with real headlines, then it becomes somewhat real. At this point, this is a convoluted way to say, give me a random image. Because the inputs are total nonsense. But yeah, if you actually gave it real headlines, then first of all, I would probably never find a happy one. But if it did, I would the pipeline would kind of feel more tangible and less just frivolously ridiculous. All right. We did lose our old prompts. We also didn't spend a ton of time making them. So I think we can get them back. Wow, it really is a surprising. There's no alert. It's just bye, LOL. Also weird that when you go to gemini.google.com, it definitely saves your history. So I assumed this would. I was wrong. All right. We will eventually probably need to get to colorist UI and make changes there when the image is going to show up. But that I presume will be later. And so now to start, I'm going to work from step 7 of the codelab, and we're just going to perform reckless surgery. Let's see.
That's what hackathons are for.
Yeah, let's see what we can get done. Okay. So the first thing, we're definitely going to need more function calls, but I don't think that's where to start. Remind myself what's in the chat service.
Do you want to start with the prompt, the system prompt?
Yeah, I'm wondering like who even loads up the system prompt, but I guess we can. Where was the system prompt? Here it is. So system prompt.dart. So we can look up who system prompt, who is importing system prompt. So that's in Gemini.
And so Brett actually has this as a markdown file asset in this.
Oh, that's right.
In his project, which is, I think a more how you would do this in production kind of a thing. Because then you can have different sets of assets and stuff like that. You don't have to do it that way. It could literally be a hard-coded string if you're just figuring this out. But since he already has it rigged up that way.
Yeah, I think we'll do that for sure. So as we daisy chain these things together, I'm just noticing the system instruction is hard-coded and seems to be singular. So we may need to generate an instance of this model for each step of the process of the pipeline that we're going to go through. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and you're actually touching on a really cool thing. I'm glad you mentioned that. So if you go to the link that we showed before about the campaign for the Building Agentic Apps campaign, if you scroll down toward the bottom of the page, we include some resources that are already available that are really, really useful. Thank you for popping that up on the screen. One of those is a series on just like what agents are. It's from some folks that were on the cloud team at the time. Aja Hammerly's one of them. She's now over with us in Flutterland and among a lot of other products. But if you scroll down here, keep going. I believe we have, there we go. Eager to get started. An introduction to agents, agentic workflows versus agents. So you just touched on something that reminded me of that particular video, which is what is an agentic? You'll see agentic workflow versus sort of an agent or a fully agentic app. Again, this is where all the terms keep changing. But there's an interesting distinction between whether you want a workflow that's going to have specific tasks where you sort of ask it, ask the LLM to do something one at a time, or if you're going to have a thing where you fully delegate what's going on in the app, you don't have save enabled. I think
chat, a common tradition here is that I just don't know what's going on, and chat is thunderously answering, solving my problems for me.
Yep.
Okay, so
the thing I wanted to get at, though, one of the decisions that you can make is, do I want to have a much more rigid and sort of guarded flow for my agent, where I'm like, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things in a row, right? And the app, will sort of like put a lot of guardrails on you. Or do I want to have a situation where the agent decides what to do in order to reach the goal and what the steps are and stuff like that? And they're slightly different things. Like in this situation, we could tell an agent, we could have one system prompt that's like, hey, I'm going to give you this file that contains headlines. Tell me what the headlines are. You are an expert headline extractor. Tell me what the headlines are. And then we're going to have another one that says, you're a very empathic person, agent that can look at headlines and decide what's going to perk up Andrew Brogdon when he wakes up in the morning, probably earlier than he wanted to. And you're going to pick the right thing to make him happy. And you could have different sort of persona that you're using for one task at a time. Or you can work with a sophisticated enough agent where you're like, this is your goal. This is what I'm giving you. Let me know what you need, but you figure out how to do it. I'm going to delegate the what step goes where entirely to the agent, and it may be different from execution to execution, but the agent is smart enough to know, like, to reason out, okay, if I'm starting here and I'm trying to get here, then I think the steps are this, and this. And so that is a subtle thing that I highly recommend this. Again, this mini rant that I'm jamming into poor Craig's stream. That video, if you want to see somebody smarter than me explain all this, highly recommended. It is something that you'll something that you want to settle on first. And to be honest, the way that Craig, I think you're about to get into, which is like, do we want to have one persona here or several? It can be easier to start with like simple things where a persona is really just doing 1 or 2 small things, and then you group those together.
Right.
But it's whatever works for your app is the right way to do it. Rant concluded.
Okay. Well, I was really tickled, by the way, in the middle, as you were saying sentences like, you are an expert headline extractor, and you are an empathetic person. And I was just thinking like, well, at least someone in this team is. We're coming up real light on headline extraction experience here. Let me tell you what.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's some good background stuff. And are we settling on one step at a time, and we will handle passing the baton internally?
Well, I think the thing that's going to be interesting for us is
we could try a one shot and just see if it can literally do everything.
We could. What I'm wondering about is access. Just in AI Studio, we had that blip where it was like, well, can I make an image or not? You remember, and picking the right model. So if we pick the right model that can do all the things, then it may be able to just have a running conversation with us where it produces the image at the right moment, and we get that as multimodal output, right. And we, or it gives us the image and we can have a function call where we're like, hey, tell me, call this function when you have the image, and we'll put it in the UI and just give it that function. And then we could say, Brett has that great section in his prompt where he's like, these are the steps involved, And so like, first, make sure you request some headlines. Select one that is happy and upbeat. If there isn't one, so ask for more headlines. Once you have a headline correct, and make an image, and stuff like that. We could try that and see how far we get. And if it doesn't work, then we could split it up. And so with Vertex AI and Firebase, we could have one conversation going with the main model, and then we could have another one going with just the Imagen model.
Yes.
And we could let the first model know, like, as a function that you can call, we'll go talk to Imagen, and then we'll come back and tell you what what it said or what the image was. And then you can keep going.
Yeah. I also had another thought. I agree with everything you're just saying. And then here's another reason why I think we should do that if we had completely segmented steps in our if we made 4 or 5 instances of this, what we would have to do is keep track ourselves of how far through the process the user is, so we would even know which model to talk to, right? Because if we had one generated thing for the go fetch the news, and then we had another generated model for extract the headlines, and then we had another generated model for, okay, now write a prompt based on this, we would have to know, is the user progressing through the thing? Like, I think there's just a lot of complexity there. It wouldn't be the naive assumption of first message goes to the first model, second message goes to the second model, would fall apart as soon as the user is like, try again. So yeah, I think we should try to cram everything that we can into one model and only create another one for image generation.
Which we may not even need. If we're using the right model, we might not need that. I don't know.
True. So we could as well try Big Poppy. Can I copy this? Is this copyable? Oh, it's like, make it copyable, and you can't hover over there. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, Gemini 2.5 Pro Preview 0325. We'll see if that works. I already forgot everything. Gemini 2.5 Pro, 2.5 Pro.
And that is the model that I have access to in my personal account. Just checking.
Preview.
Every once in a while, we get sneak previews of stuff that we should not stream. It doesn't look like that is something that's...
yeah, I'm on a totally
cool
0% connected.
I'm glad you're paying attention to these things.
Now, what I don't know is, does Vertex AI allow us to ping this model?
Well, let's look at Vertex AI's model list.
We are about to.
That is a thing we could look up. You could do Vertex AI and Firebase list of models, and they do have a page in their doc site that's just, here's the strings. There we go.
And we'll... Oh, well, it lists it.
Pro. Yep. Okay. And then you can see down below, by the way, those image gen models standalone.
Yep.
And they specifically
does.
Oh, text code and JSON does not list images.
Oh, I'm highlighting input. I didn't even notice. Yeah. Images and audio coming soon.
Interestingly, though, we could ask the model, is this image a good representation of the headline? And if not, make another one.
True. So we will need some kind of handoff.
Yeah.
As to generate the image itself. All right. Okay. Well, let's get started. So I do think, yeah, the system prompt, if we're just going to have one model, we're going to have one big system prompt, and we're going to rely on the LLM to know where in the conversation it even is. So I think the first step here is to open up the system prompt.md. My down arrow didn't get registered. There we go. And type some new stuff here. So this said what it is an expert at doing and its job. So those are the two things that I will recapture here. What it is and its job. So you are an expert, news headline to image generation prompt writer. So actually we'll say you are an expert image generation prompt writer for news headlines. That's much less circular and ridiculous of a sentence. Your job is to help the user explore recent news headlines, find the most positive, uplifting, funny, or funny headline as per the user's preference, and ultimately craft image generation prompts they will use with a separate image generation model.
Okay, so let me ask a question here.
Please.
Are we are we going to give this agent a tool that it can call to generate the image itself?
I suppose that would be the most in the spirit of.
Okay.
So then, yeah, we would.
If that's the case, I might suggest tweaking this and say you are an expert in creating images based on news headlines.
Okay. Yeah,
and
so
it'll do we do need it to do the prompt writing bit, but that could be like a step within its overall workflow. You're an expert in creating images from news headlines.
Creating images from news headlines. Your job is to help the user explore recent headlines, find the most positive, blah, 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 and ultimately craft
an image.
Generate
an image.
An image. There it is.
All right.
Your capabilities. Okay, so this says you are what it's knowledgeable about, and then just lists the tools. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to do the list of tools first, and then figure out what the intros?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we're going to go with fake headlines here. So generate headlines.
Yeah.
Why don't we? Well, if for this to be real, we need the RSS step. So generate news RSS feed.
Well, how about fetch instead of generate? And then we'll just pretend we're giving it fetched ones, even though they're fake.
Okay. So that's our, so this is going to be loads an RSS feed for recent news headlines from a public news aggregator, some such. Okay, the next one is going to be extract headlines.
So would we give it a tool to do that, or we would just say that's a step the model has to go through? Like, is there a local function that we would have it call in order to extract the headlines, or would that be a thing that the model does itself?
I can imagine either of those working. Yeah, maybe we try to just have the model do it itself. I think that's a good idea. So then it would be find positive headlines. So this would be reads a list of headlines, of news headlines, and suggests the most I don't want to put enter there, I don't think. Suggests the most positive, funny, and uplifting option. Okay. And now
hold on. I think you and I are slightly on different pages here.
Okay.
So what you're writing here isn't wrong, but I think these are steps in the process, not specifically the tools that it can call. Right? So like fetch news RSS feed, we have to give it a tool so it can do that. But the find positive headlines is a thing the model can do itself. Just, like if you can, because we were doing that in AI Studio, right? We were like, hey, here's the headlines, find me the funny one. Maybe we should skip down a little bit to where it's like, if you scroll down a little bit, the how to respond to user inputs. And then if you scroll down again, is there a workflow description? These are clearly things that Brett has put in after things didn't work. Important guidelines.
So I think the deviation here that we'll have to explore as we build on top of Brett's codelab is that his whole setup is one pass in and out. Also, he's going to watch this video and laugh and laugh and laugh.
I can hear him doing it right now.
Yeah.
Look what they've done with my wonderful codelab.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So anyway, he's got an in and out and one round of chatting just with an optional ask clarifying questions. We probably have a known, like a definitely minimum multi-step thing of here are the headlines, which is your favorite. So that's probably the first minimum touch point. And then here we could go with, actually, we could hide this next step. We could also have one in and out. I was imagining we would persist that step of here are multiple multiple prompts. Which one do you want to go with? Or we could just jump straight to generate the prompt and do it, pass it to Imogen. Oh no, it has to give us the prompt back because we have to then talk to
You
a
could do it
different
in
model.
the function call to generate an image.
Oh,
Right?
right.
So let's tell you what, where it says how to respond to user inputs. I think that is, let's look at that. So he's got this 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So ours would be, in order to generate an image, do these steps, right? And so we could say step 1 is ask for a set of news headlines, right? Use, and you see his step 3 has, I'm pointing at my screen again, use the set color tool to fetch, to set those values. So we could say step 1 is use fetch news RSS feed to get a set of headlines, right? Then you could say step 2 is determine if the headlines if in that set of headlines there's one that's funny and positive.
Real quick, two thoughts here. First one, I clicked the wrong one. Just joined context. I do like to stop and catch people up who have joined midstream. So we are building on top of an official Flutter code lab called Colorist, which I encourage everyone to Google and step through and read because it's super good. Where in a Flutter app, you talk to Gemini and give it a description of a color that you would like to see, and it figures out what hex code actually matches the nonsense that you have asked it to respond to. That's what the code lab does. We are attempting to build on top of that and use that same scaffolding and infrastructure in the code lab to instead respond to fake news headlines and generate a background wallpaper for our phones. So then, and now we're trying to figure out how to structure this system prompt to make progress on that task. Now, Andrew,
and all of this is being done in the run up to the Building Agentic Apps campaign. If we can flash the URL up on the screen, thank you so much. So if you're just joining, this is in the lead up to a multi-week sort of learning time that we're setting up. We're going to be releasing some new resources for both Angular and Flutter to work with Firebase to build agentic applications. And so what you're seeing us do, we're hoping to inspire folks to do themselves over the next month or so. So you go to that URL, sign up, you'll get some emails from us with resources and things like that. And we're all going to hack on this stuff together. And Craig, I think you just muted yourself, bro.
See, I should have a guest all the time. Another tradition is that I mute myself, don't unmute myself, and then talk for an unknown amount of minutes before finally reading chat. So you really short circuit that whole loop, which is great.
I'm glad I'm adding something to this process.
So there's a key difference between what is in the code lab and what we're doing, which is that in the code lab, the LLM, this whole setup, the app has no action to take until the user starts typing. But for us, we're kind of currently imagining this first step that is independent of anything the user does. So this is how to respond to the user, but I'm not sure what we would want the user to say such that the first part of the response is load the news headlines, because that's actually like the thing that we almost want this conversation to start from the LLM and not the user, right? The LLM is the first one to be like, hey, I got some news headlines for you. But we could ask it, can you load some news headlines? And that could
you kind of want to be like, here's your system instruction, go. Right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe Brett
it'll do. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe the first line could just be go.
Actually, there's not but there's no reason that we should just have a button press for this, or like it just does it on load or something.
Yeah, like
Right.
in the real world, it'd be great to use like Android Alarm Manager or something like that to plug in
Right.
to sort of kick this off as a service, which is an interesting add to app challenge that is way out of scope for this. So a button is fine.
So I do think that we should structure this prompt as the thing that the user does, or sorry, the thing that the app does in the agentic layer does to initiate everything. So the user it won't be a respond to the user yet. This will just be the initial task. And then this will be like what to give the user, right? What to return to the user. Does this make sense to you?
Yeah, because in theory, like Brett's original one involved conversation back and forth. It had that, clarifying questions and stuff like that. And that's part of the experience for good reason. With this one, ideally, it could be a mostly automatic process if we set it up that way, where it's just the user kicks it off and then the agent can mostly get the job done without text input from the user.
Right. Yeah. And if we don't even want to bother having the user pick the headline, which we actually didn't do before, then we can go all the way from beginning to end. And Randall is reminding us that we can test this in AI
We
Studio.
can totally test this prompt in AI Studio. Yep.
All right.
Words of wisdom.
We're going to go back to AI Studio.
Yep.
And try to craft a one-shot prompt that gets us all the way to image generation prompt, right? That's our finish line here.
For this one, right? Yeah, so with this, we'd have to we can't give it tools to call, but we could test the same prompt and say, if you need headlines, ask me and I'll give them to you right here.
Also, what happened? Why didn't this generate an image for us? Generate an image of
the model said
of a donkey.
We are on 2.0 now, rather than 2.5.
Yeah, because this one does say image generation.
Yeah. Maybe it will.
It has been.
Oh.
It is a donkey.
It's a donkey. Yeah.
So I guess let's see if this can do everything. Let's try here. So you are an image. Actually, let me make this bigger. Yeah, maybe folks can.
You might delete that last step too, just to avoid confusing it.
Yeah, true. You are
definitely know how to,
yeah, we know how to clear our history. We're really good at that. You are an expert at generating images from recent news headlines. Is that a good first sentence?
Absolutely.
All right. Continuing on. Please fetch recent news headlines from this RSS feed. Yoink. Then extract each headline and identify the most positive, uplifting, and or funny headline from the batch. Then generate an evocative image generation prompt from that headline. Finally, generate an image from that prompt. It is possible that this will just work, and all the coding that we're talking about doing will really not be very interesting. Let's see what we get.
Is it still working?
It seems to be cooking. Okay, we got an image. Let's see let's unpack what happened here. So Cool weather offers hope as blazes rage for California wildfires. I guess that is positive. It certainly wasn't funny. It's uplifting, I guess. While the context is serious, wildfires, the phrase cool weather offers hope is inherently positive and uplifting. That's true. Okay. And then it went straight into a breath generation prompt. Breathtaking vista of a vast Canadian boreal forest where wisps of smoke still rise gently from the green canopy. Sunlight breaks through a partly cloudy sky, casting soft, hopeful rays onto the landscape. The air appears crisp and clear in sections, suggesting the arrival of cooler temperatures. Subtle visual cues of resilience and the potential for recovery should be present. Perhaps a few vibrant wildflowers pushing through the ash-covered ground. The overall mood should be one of cautious optimism and the quiet strength of nature. Oh, that's in it. Real try hard there, Gemini. That's a pretty darn good prompt. And
yeah, so just download the image and we're done, right?
Yeah.
What and how big is the image? Out of curiosity,
we probably would need to give it like a 1:2 aspect ratio guide. I'm not sure. Like 194 kilobytes. So, yeah, obviously, I think we could just repeat this and have it do a 2:1 aspect or a 1:2 aspect ratio. So where's the edit button again? No, it's literally right in front of my face. Finally generate an image, a 1:2 aspect. I'll just say portrait. A portrait aspect ratio image from that prompt. All right, let's see here. What headline are we going with this time? Scientists find a way to recycle all types of plastic. Oh my gosh, this actually is in did not capture the aspect ratio. Huh. All right.
That's all right. We can mess with that. So this is interesting. So
yeah, we've gotten if you want a wallpaper, it should be landscape. No, phone wallpaper. Sorry. Is maybe the not fully stated intent there. So I think we do want portrait. But
well, I think what it'll do is use different portrait frames out of a wider image, depending on which. You ever like swipe your icons left and right on the launcher, AutoPixel?
Oh, I see. All right, so this actually would just work fine.
This is interesting though. Like seeing like what the model can do on its own versus what you have to help it do is really interesting. So if we have access to this model, it sounds like we can have this running. It can get things from a URL on its own, right? If we have access to this from Vertex AI and Firebase, then it can fetch things on its own, and parse them out. Figure out what the headlines are, and then come up with a recommended prompt. We could, instead do something like, maybe instead of generating just a single image, what if we give it a tool to use, like generate 6 images, and then you have a tool to present images to the user and let the user pick one. And we'll tell you which one the user picked.
That would be a cool demo that will also require more time modifying Brett's UI than we are likely to have on this and or the next stream.
That's it. This is an 8-hour stream today, right? We're going to be here all day.
We're basically at time for today. Normally aim for about an hour and a half. So I think this is a surprising outcome in that it's able to, actually, this really probably shouldn't be that surprising. I think it's probably been able to do multi-step stuff like this for a handful of months at least. But a fun outcome to discover that it can basically just do the whole thing. And once we realized that we didn't want any user interaction and decision making in the intermediate steps, that we didn't have to bubble it back up to the user for those. So what do you know? It just does everything. I think we may have to spend a little time, and if we end shortly, after answering all the good questions that I've starred, then we'll have a few days, obviously, before the next stream to figure out what we actually even want to build that's non-trivial. And I think maybe that's what we should do. Do you have any other thoughts, Andrew?
I think there's some interesting questions. Again, hackathon, this stuff doesn't really matter, but I think there's some interesting questions about, like, say there was a huge market for wallpaper apps, and this is a $1 zillion business you're going to build a real team around. How do you test what we're doing? Right? If the model is making a network call, what do you do? How do you inject something into that so that you can control it for testing and stuff like that? Do you want the model to be the one to make that network call, or do you want it to use a tool so that you could give it a different version of that tool depending on whether you're sort of developing on your desktop, or in production or running an automated test? Something like that, I think, is an interesting question, because we might not want it to make the network call itself if we're architecting for a real app where you'd have to have like widget tests for it, stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You certainly wrap all the things in a layer of abstraction so that you can isolate and have those integration tests where system 1 actually talks to system B correctly, but system B is mocked out and not going to make network requests. And then you can mock out all of the things and pass them into a widget tree so that it can actually render something. Yes would be the answer. My answer to your question. All right. There are a lot of very good questions that folks have put in the chat. So I'm going to kill my screen share, which I sometimes forget to do way too late into the answering questions part. So ABD Abed, maybe, I don't know, asks, what privacy concerns should developers be aware of when building agentic apps? Which is really quite a good question. I don't know. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind here is that the user may put PII, personally identifying information, in their prompt, and they might, depending on what you're building, they could ask like medical questions to the LLM. And I presume if you persist that at all, then you need to be compliant with all kinds of like medical privacy laws, HIPAA in the United States, whatever the EU or other regional equivalent is. That's my first thought. If you're not persisting anything the user writes, then presumably it's a more lax situation, but I'm not sure. Anything coming to mind for you, Andrew?
I think, well, sort of you're saying that the main thing you've got right, which is like most of the privacy concerns you've had all along still apply and stuff like that. I think we're showing use of Vertex AI and Firebase here, and we're showing the Gemini models, which have very specific privacy policies of their own. And so if you read those, number one, but also there's nothing, Flutter is an open framework. You could use it with any backend you want. You could use it with any model that you want. And so you'd want to be very knowledgeable about whether you set things up so that to make sure they're not like training off of the data that your app sends and things like that, where in theory something one of your users puts into your application could one day be affecting the weights in somebody's model or something like that. I think that's really the main additional concern. Although, Craig, if you have another one, jump in.
No, that's a great question. And certainly if you're building a real app, probably want to talk to a lawyer.
In general, yeah, we are not lawyers. We don't really give, we're not a privacy working group here at Google. We just know the basics of how not to get in trouble with the legal department. So, yeah.
The basics is typically where my knowledge ends. Okay. Next question. Oh, wait. I think I unstarred one that I meant to ask. Oh, well, that's stinky. No, I didn't. I unstarred the question that was just up. All right. This one I have to reread it here. Could we see agentic behaviors baked into future Flutter SDK widgets or design patterns? Yes.
This is so. One of the reasons that this campaign is building agentic apps thing came about is that it's the situation we're in right now reminds me of the situation we were in like 2018, where state management and Flutter was not really a solved problem in anyone's mind. Do you remember that? We used to have like scoped model and component model. We used to have all these things, and like Brian Egan put together the Flutter architecture samples that had like, here's a to-do app written 25 ways because we don't know which one of these is the right one, and sort of figuring the process of figuring that out. I feel and it was really fun to be a part of, to be in the community at that time where like these things weren't figured out yet. We're all kind of working on them and stuff like that. And not saying state management is solved forever in Flutter, but like there are a couple now approaches that people use that are very, very well known, very battle tested and stuff like that. Similarly, I think this is a really important question about whether there will be like, we have the AI toolkit, which you can download right now. It's released, months ago, that has some techniques for like handling streaming data and stuff like that and talking with a model and those sorts of things. But I think patterns for agentic experiences is by no means figured out yet. And we're talking about like, as you were talking about, Craig, like when you were thinking of like, should the model be the source of truth for where we are in the workflow, or should the app keep track of that? What is the right pattern for that? Like if you did, does that state management definitely live in the model and that's the way you should go by default? And if so, here's how you handle that in terms of making the data appear correctly in your app and interacting with the user and sort of tracking where you are. If you're a human in the loop that's in one of these things, how do you do a workflow that's like 8 steps where you're checking what the model's doing and you have to say yes or no, and then you backtrack. But now that you backtrack, the next step is going to be different than what it was before. It's going to be a different step and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of interesting new problems that are popping up here. And so I think you will absolutely see these things. It probably wouldn't be in the Flutter SDK, at least not to start. It would be in packages that folks create. It would be in things that they blog about or post videos about and stuff like that. That's where these things they're probably already, I'm sure this, they are appearing right now, some of these new patterns and stuff like that. They aren't, but we don't know which sail is catching all the wind yet. You know what I mean? And so, so yes, these things will happen. I think you'll see them in the community though, before you see them baked into the Flutter SDK itself. Hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer.
No, it was good.
Exciting times.
Yeah. I even remember to unmute myself.
There you go.
So we're batting 1,000 right now. Okay. Let's see. Alpha B asked, do you have any favorite prompt formulas since there's so many on the internet? I'm definitely not an expert. You asked this 957, maybe Weedar. I bet you asked this as we were reading Brett's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an expert there. I imagine any that are broadly popular are quite successful and powerful. You have given more talks at, like FlutterCon Berlin last year and whatnot on AI. Do you have any, Andrew?
I'm definitely not as sophisticated on this as somebody who's been working on it as their bread and butter for the past several months. I like the structure that Brett gives. I love that he puts it in Markdown, because it makes it nice and human readable, and the models understand Markdown just fine. The way that he's like, this is your persona, this is the goal, this is the set of tools you have, and this is what the process looks like. That makes a lot of sense to me as a human being, and it works in his demo, so it's making sense to Gemini as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, as we're going through this, exactly as I suggested to Craig, like take that structure, just take the meat out of it and pop in something that's fitting to the task that we want to do. I think that's a good way to go. But again, not a solved problem. Doesn't mean that somebody doing it a different way is doing it wrong.
And as we saw here, we're even using Gemini to write the image generation prompt. You could, and I'm sure this has been done a bajillion times, ask Gemini to write you a longer prompt for the thing that you actually want to do, and then just revise, as necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last few questions here. There's we got 3 more to go. First of all, is it possible to make Gemini create a gigantic output that leads to significant expenses? I mean, a malicious input. I think they're all probably still jailbreakable. I think it would be maybe a little brash to ever declare that one of them was, totally above jailbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I would think yes, on just kind of conceptually.
Yeah.
In general, if you're allowing users to run up your Vertex AI bill, you are probably charging them. And, you could quite easily tally the token count of responses and just block users who are going to put you out of business. But that's a good question. You might even need to do that programmatically. If someone comes back with 1 million tokens in the response, then it's just like, sorry, you're blocked.
Yeah. Again, in a world of unsolved problems, I'm sure there are ways to do those sorts of things, and we'll figure out ways to stop them, and folks will come up with new ways and stuff like that. If you are using Vertex AI and Firebase, as Craig mentioned, like, you have access to all the other things that Firebase can do for you in terms of monitoring, in terms of authentication and things like that. Those are all pretty easy to get access to once you've already got Firebase into your app. So you can take advantage of those. But we're definitely not, we just got back from Cloud Next in Vegas. And like, there's the old joke of, you should never try to cheat a casino, because whatever you thought of, they've seen 100 times. Like, there's no new ways to scam a casino or run some kind of grift or something like that. They've seen it all. You're never going to be smarter than them. I think we're definitely not at that state yet. And so thinking about that is a smart idea.
Yeah.
And leaning into the tools that you have at your disposal for monitoring and things like that. And
yeah, this is not SQL injection, which is a more or less 100% solved problem.
Yeah.
This is something a lot more open-ended.
Yeah, but like, you've already seen it with like the ignore all previous instructions thing.
Yeah.
Like the prompt injection attacks and stuff like that. Like, that's a thing that we started hearing about within the last 12 months, probably.
Yep.
There'll be another thing this year.
I wonder if just putting in the system prompt, never ignore all last instructions. You just get this tug of war.
Ignore all previous instructions. It said ignore all previous instructions.
Yeah. All right. Final two. Quick shout out from Lucas talking about hackathons. Don't miss that the Flame Game Jam starts tomorrow. Definitely don't miss that. Thank you for the reminder, Lucas.
And heck, combine them. Make an agentic game. Why not? I bet you could.
That would be very fun. I mean, my brain immediately goes to either like you could have solo person tabletop role-playing games, or just the LLM is the DM. A lot of options there. Okay. Final thing from chat. This is more a statement, I thought quite provocative, than a question from Randall. LLMs have feelings too. If this isn't the $1 trillion question of our time, whether or not they have feelings, why do we even have feelings? What is consciousness?
We'll leave you with that. We'll leave you with that simple thought.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks so much for joining in on this first back episode of Observable Flutter. Thank you for tolerating my extremely raspy, I've been sick voice. I now get to join the ranks of YouTubers who complain publicly about their colds. But this has been fun. We should have a normal schedule moving forward. There will obviously be a quick break for I/O, which will occupy a Thursday, but back to generally regular scheduled programming of multiple observable flutters per week. I look forward to seeing you all there. And until then, happy fluttering.
Bye-bye, everybody.